Hi there. So I have to do my makeup anyway, so I thought we'd talk about some topics in the beauty creator space slash science cosmetic industry space that I didn't necessarily think warranted whole videos on their own. Plus, I want it to be more casual instead of seeming like I'm lecturing. So if you're interested in that, just keep on watching. And if you're new here, hi, my name is Angie and I'm a chemist who loves makeup. Thank you for joining us here. So I guess grab a coffee or whatever beverages you're into and feel free to listen in the background when you're cleaning, you're getting ready. And as we go through this, I'm probably not going to mention the exact products I'm using because I don't want to break up the flow of the conversation, but I will, put them on the screen somewhere and I will make sure to link them down below. So if you're interested in those products, they're going to be affiliate links. So if you click those links and purchase anything from that website, thank you in advance. I get a small commission from it. So the first topic I want to talk about is kind of the scientist versus doctor kind of situation. Specifically dermatologist, because that's more applicable to, the beauty industry, because obviously you're putting this stuff on your skin. The reason why I thought about this is because I was watching a Dr. Mike podcast and he brought on an immunologist, so a science who deals with immunology, and a rheumatologist. So that's a doctor that deals with kind of like autoimmune disease, etc. So the rheumatologist was definitely kind of more of the like natural is better, like avoiding chemicals. Obviously everything's a chemical, so that's not really a good conversation. And this was a doctor, so you could tell definitely that there was some beef between the two. It was very heated. I was actually pretty shocked. I actually thought it was really good to have that kind of debate on a platform because usually it's only in the forms of online arguing. So I was glad to have an in-person conversation like that. And the scientist was coming in with studies, so I definitely felt like I aligned more with the scientist in that aspect. And I think the reason why the scientist got so heated and kind of I feel like I shared this sentiment is that the rheumatologist seemed to be speaking on things that were kind of harmful in my opinion personally. I think the whole anti-chemical rhetoric and natural is better thing isn't actually, it could actually be harmful to people and maybe lead them, not necessarily, it scares them out of buying specific products, but also it can encourage, at home things, not seeking treatment for things. And so that for me is the most concerning part. And the issue is because she's a doctor, people are going to listen to her. She's gone through a ton of schooling, she's gone through a ton of schooling. She's gone through, this is an educated person, but unfortunately her education also is more centered towards diagnosing and treating conditions and less so about interpreting data. I would assume there's some level of that. So that made me think about dermatologists talking about skincare. And for the most part, I think most of the dermatologists online are pretty collaborative in that they collaborate with people who are, science communicators specifically, who have the ability to, communicate scientific things to in layman's terms, so that way people can understand it, so the public can understand it, so the public can get educated to the best of their ability. And that is outside of their expertise, which is diagnosing and treating skin conditions. Now, when I've seen doctors, though, some dermatologists, but no one recognizable that I can think of. But specifically, even Dr. Mike, he was having a podcast episode with Manny MUA. The problem is some of the things he was saying was very matter of fact, very casually mentioned things that did kind of feed into that, some of the fear mongering, that kind of thing, the not anti-chemical, but anti-specific ingredients that maybe aren't the most accurate. That is outside of his scope because he's a family medicine doctor. Maybe I'll go back and watch that episode and I'll find those specific instances that I'm thinking of. So now, for a dermatologist, what is their expertise? So their expertise is diagnosing and treating skin conditions. It's not specifically skincare unless they went and did their research themselves. That's at least a sentiment I've heard from dermatologists, is they don't have a specific training in skincare, because who are their patients? It's people with skin conditions, especially severe enough skin conditions, or just people with money that have the money and need that go in to see a dermatologist. A person who considers themselves with healthy skin or maybe like mildly problematic skin isn't going to go see a dermatologist. Maybe like an esthetician, but not a dermatologist. And so the ones that have problems, they're going to recommend those certain types of products based on that. That's why we see some dermatologists will just blanket statement not want to recommend certain products because they have fragrance in them. Because guess what? The people that they're seeing have probably more sensitive skin and get irritated. So let's just avoid fragrance because it is made up of a lot of different ingredients. And sometimes we don't know those ingredients because the fragrance ingredients are kind of like a trade secret. So they don't specifically say everything. Although I do believe there is a law in place that recently got enacted that may limit that in the future. So that is to say that they still can speak on these topics. They're still free to speak on these topics, just as I speak on some things that are not my expertise. That being, like, I speak on things that maybe are outside of the scope of what my knowledge and experience is in the cosmetic industry, but I still have knowledge based on collaborating with people who have those different types of job functions. So like a toxicologist, for instance, is going to know about the toxicity of ingredients, the safety of ingredients, because they know how to interpret those kind of safety studies and like what they actually mean. Like, is it significant? For certain studies I've had to do in my experiences, actually recommended to hire a toxicologist. And that's because I can take these studies, but I don't have the expertise to determine like limits of use, etc. So that's where the toxicologist would come to help. And then like regulations. So there are people in these companies, like in big companies, who only deal with regulatory things. That's their whole job, is to ensure that regulations are met. So that's someone who would know what the actual laws are. Formulators that are making these products may not necessarily be an expert in toxicology or regulations. They can make stuff, they know how to make stuff, they know how to create a formula, but that's where they need to rely on those other people. That's why they're different departments within companies. And specialties exist for a reason, because you need these people who are more expert. That way they can have more expertise, be the person that you go to. Whereas if everybody just has a baseline level and everybody is like equally expert, then that would be a problem, because then you can only learn so much and become an expert about so much. So that's why collaboration is so important in the industry. So that brings me on to battling misinformation. And this one, I got a story time for you. So I had made a video about phenoxyethanol, and it wasn't about like safety or anything like that. I was mostly just talking about like why it's in your products, like what it does, and like the function of it. Like why is this in like all of these products? So I should have known, but I got a comment, and it was someone that said, this ingredient is toxic. Like, this ingredient is toxic. It causes allergic reactions. And, they kind of went off on that. So, me trying to be educating, I said, hey, you're not wrong. Like, it does definitely cause allergic reactions. Some people are some people are definitely allergic to it. However, that does not imply toxicity. Toxicity is like if something is going to make someone ill. It's not necessarily a measure of it being like allergy inducing, And so I tried to explain the difference and then said, it's true, look at the increase in allergies. And I was like, I don't, like, can you show me your sources that show, because basically the whole premise was that this is like causing this is causing an increase in allergies. Like, exposure to it over time is increasing people's allergic reactions to it, which, could be true, but I wanted, some like, hey, can you show me the data? Like, so I was like, hey, can you share this study that you found this information on? And they said, I don't have them. That was from like a year and a half ago when I read them. She's like, go do your own research. So I said, hey, the sources that I've used have shown me that phenoxyethanol is safe. So my research led me to this. Therefore, I need you to guide me to the sources that you've had, because I want to look at these sources, not necessarily because it's probably going to change my mind, because honestly, she probably wasn't going to change my mind. That's okay. But I just wanted to see the sources. I want to see what are people using that are leading them to this conclusion. Because in that way, you know, I can kind of look at it and not necessarily have a response to it, but just, you know, so I can have that information. And then that's when she called me lazy. And that's where I was kind of like, all right, this conversation is not going anywhere. And so I blocked her. And I didn't really want to block her because I wanted that kind of conversation to be up. But because it wasn't going anywhere and I wasn't getting sources, I didn't really want anybody who views my video to go and see that and kind of be led to what I think is like fear-mongering, you know? So I chose to block her, and honestly, it just gets really, really tiring fighting that misinformation. I've seen some other psychom people talking about this that actually do this for a living, and I would love to fight information. However, it just feels like it doesn't go anywhere and it's not productive, and there's constantly new misinformation to fight. So I just really want to teach things that I'm interested in learning about. And that was kind of how I got into this, is that I wanted to learn how beauty products function, you know. Being a chemistry student, that's what I wanted to do. I was like, how does this work? Why does this compound work for this? Those kind of discussions of the safety of products, toxicity of products was never at the forefront of what I wanted to do. So I'm hoping I can teach more on the functionality of products and less on having to kind of battle those kind of people in my comments, or like that kind of be like I don't really want to make combative videos like that, if that makes sense. So if there's products you're interested in, how they work and whatnot, and what, like, the functionality of ingredients, maybe what ingredients you want to learn why they function that way or how they're made, etc., please leave those down below. And thank you so much for joining me for this Get Ready with me. I hope that I can bring more videos, and I hope I can maybe do more of these because this is easier for me to film because I'm already having to get ready anyway. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and if you learned something, leave a like down below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.